Hey my awesome friends, it's Anissa, and in this video I'm going to tell you why I would not give birth at a hospital. Please don't take this as medical advice. If you have a high-risk pregnancy, it may be more appropriate for you to give birth at a hospital. However, most people don't have a high-risk pregnancy, and it's safe to give birth at a birth center or do a home birth. Now, let's get to why I would not give birth at the hospital. I'm going to start right where we left off from the first video, part 1, and that is at 9 p.m. Baby came out. I had an unmedicated natural hospital birth. That's no epidural, and I had no IVs hooked up to me. If you missed that video, you can watch it here before or after this video. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. In my birth plan, I wanted delayed cord clamping. I was thinking roughly about 10 minutes. The OB had different ideas and pushed for 2 minutes. So after 2 minutes, the OB asked me, "It's been 2 minutes. Can we go ahead and cut the cord and then get the placenta out?" After having a pretty positive birth experience and I was fully alert, I was like, yeah, sure, what the heck, why not? So after waiting for 2 minutes, they clamped the cord, cut it, and then they started to pull on the placenta. Now, this is an intervention that is done to help the placenta dislodge from the uterus, and then that's your second birth that you give. Right after the placenta extraction, I started bleeding, and so they gave me some Pitocin to create more contractions in hopes that the bleeding will stop. I also got local anesthetic because I had a second-degree tear, and they needed to do some stitches. The doctor was able to stop the bleeding and so went ahead and moved me over to postpartum. Now this is from the labor delivery. You get moved over to postpartum where it's rest and recovery. This is at 11 p.m. My dad, Abba, and my friend Helen left at about 11:30, and then at about 12 o'clock, I started feeling some heartburn or indigestion. So I called the nurse and asked the nurse if I could get some medication to soothe that. When the nurse came back with the medication, I couldn't move my arms. And then I couldn't open my eyes and I was seeing specks of light. The nurse quickly turned on the light and she said I was white as a sheet. And so what she did is to move the head of the bed down. Now this allows the blood to rush to my head, and so I was able to open my eyes. Now for some science. Normal blood pressure is 120/80. The 120 is systolic pressure, which is the amount of pressure that is exerted from your heart to push the blood all over your organs. Mine was sitting at 46, which means there was not enough pressure or blood volume to push blood all over to my body. So my body was focusing the blood only to the vital organs, which is your heart, lungs, and your brain. This is a simple case of hemorrhaging. I was bleeding internally into my uterus. So all that blood was just pooling into my uterus, which decreased the amount of blood volume around my body. So how does this happen? Well, when you're pregnant, your body actually builds a whole new separate organ called the placenta. So at the wall of the uterus, the placenta is created along with a bunch of blood vessels that connect your body, the uterus, to the placenta. That's the attachment that you have with your baby. When you give birth, your uterus continues contracting and contracting and contracting to dislodge the placenta so it goes out. Those blood vessels also close up. Evidence does show that pulling on the placenta can dislodge and leave the blood vessels open, and there could be a risk that the blood vessels don't close up, which is what happened to me. And so the blood was pooling into my uterus because those were still open. So at this point, the OB is back in my room along with 5 other nurses on the floor, and my husband freaking out because he knows when everyone is in your room, that's not a good sign. He's sitting there in the corner holding little T, who is crying, and himself just freaking out. And throughout the entire time, I told him, "It's okay, sweetie, don't worry, you'll be fine." So they got me IV fluids along more IV pain medication. I got more Pitocin, and then I needed the pain medication because how to fix this is the OB needs to put their hand into your uterus, so all the way into your uterus, and scoop out all that blood to get it out. As a nurse, I realized I was going into hypovolemic shock and it could turn into a code blue. Now I needed IV fluids and possible blood transfusion. So the entire time I was consenting to blood. I was telling everybody I consent to blood. This is my blood type. It's okay, I consent. I knew the risk and what the OB had to do. And you guys, this was way, way, way worse than labor. And they gave me some strong pain medication, which I felt like didn't help at all. In the end, I lost 2 liters of blood. The average person has 5 liters of blood. Then an hour later, I threw up from all that pain medication. I think I had a really bad nausea. Then another hour passes and I spike a fever and I start shivering everywhere. My poor husband got no sleep that night and he just sat next to my bed making sure that I was still alive along with our child. So when the hospital checked my blood levels in terms of my hemoglobin, hematocrit, they were still within the range of not having a blood transfusion. However, 2 days later, I got a transfusion of 500 milliliters of blood and then was quickly discharged home that same day, 4 hours later. All this trauma that happened to my body caused my body to focus on creating more red blood cells, not breast milk. And then it also prolonged my healing time. So little T barely received any breast milk in the first week, and then she lost a pound and became slightly jaundiced because of this. Evidence-based research shows there's a correlation between pulling the umbilical cord to remove the placenta and increase in hemorrhaging. Even though there's evidence out there, it's hard to change these traditions in the hospital. So it is best that you be an advocate for yourself or your loved ones when it comes to this. But after having this traumatic postpartum experience, my husband and I wanted to avoid the hospital and have our second birth at a birth center. You can watch this video right here for the birth of our second child. But please don't use this as medical advice. If you have a high-risk pregnancy, it may still be appropriate for you to have a hospital birth. But know that you have a choice in everything, even at the hospital. If you're not comfortable with a suggestion or an intervention, then follow your instincts and you can always say no. You can also approach unsure decisions with the acronym BRAIN. Benefits, risks, alternatives, intuition, instincts, or do nothing. Ultimately, you are the customer and you have a choice even though the healthcare professionals might want to persuade you in something else, especially if something that you're not comfortable with. You and your team, which could be your partner, your doula, your parent, a friend, whoever's there with you, need to be an advocate for you and your decisions when it comes to your birth plan and your birth story. If you haven't watched this video here, which is the birth vlog of our second child, please comment below if you had a positive birth experience. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful or you learned something from it. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye!